we find that God has it that the material is of no value without life, which is a strange thing because life is not material and is in some sense elusive in material terms. How do you measure life? And yet it's of paramount value to us over all the material. We feel that we're impoverished by death because we can't see beyond the life being used here. If it can't be used here, then nothing's of value to us. It's a strange thing, isn't it? It's strange only because we don't realize that life is what we are, and our being is everything. Far, far more important than the material. But the material has this, is it called Maya, this illusion, this of value. And we cling to it utterly because we think it's the only way of expressing life, making life possible. But life is eternal and the material is transitory. Hence we know life is of inestimable value, and the material is something just to redissipate into the earth without life. Suddenly that body becomes something just to be put back in the soil or burnt. And come that you might have life and have it more abundantly, life eternal. And that's why spiritual things, as evidenced by religion, were so foundational in society. And if you take it away because it's not material, not tangible, then the material loses value. Nothing matters. This is the material without spiritual presence. If man in his technology becomes non-spiritual, secular, finds life then has no meaning because it's transitory, very transitory. Everything is now castles in the sand. Nothing holds together. He gets very depressed and very lonely because it's not the material he wants. He wants the company of life, others, and the eternal company at that. in harmony. In other words, he is designed to long for God. My soul longs for you. My soul longs for you. Nothing else will do. Nothing else will do. My soul longs for you. My soul longs for you. My soul longs for you. Nothing else will do. Nothing else will do. My soul longs for you. My soul longs for you. And so on. And so he will spend all he has to find life and to have life, to try and keep hold of life. For the material means nothing without it. From his transitory point of view. It's very important, this point of view, because in the time dimension, every unhappiness and every mistake he makes disappears into nothing. Not in the present experience of life. And therefore he can experience his freedom and the consequences of it and learn without eternal cost, with eternal, infinite gain. It's a wonderful creation, you see. It is the perfect classroom, the perfect training place. Have you seen, I was watching on YouTube, China history, 1910s, and they've coloured up the video they've got. Pictures of China, its streets, its people milling about in the streets. And you realize the appalling poverty of most of the vast number of people. And if you look closely, they're not really talking to each other at all. Hardly at all. Well, of course, it was a film, so it didn't have a soundtrack to it. There'd been no point in filming conversation, but you notice just, or looking at the street, they're not talking. If you photograph a modern city, you noticed they're in the same poverty. What do you see? You actually see the traffic. You don't seem to see the crowds of people. There are crowds, there are occasions when, there's a jamboree of fate, a football match and so on. And you'd see a sort of unified behaviour of crowds responding, say, to sport or listening to music or watching some theatre play. but hardly any individual relating. That's the real poverty. You don't realise it. You look at a big city now on film and you see the astonishing technology, the big buildings, the traffic. Basically that. Big objects like dams and power plants and so on. Aeroplanes and ships. Canals. But you don't see the life. You can't photograph life as such. And incidentally, you see very little conversation. Usually the announcer's talking over it. Or, this is New York and here's such and such a, building and this was built by so-and-so. And the sounds that they're individually making to each other, if they are not on the film. And that's how when we look back into history and we look at these faces, they're not smiling. They're not really interacting with each other. They're trading. They're milling about in their streets and in their rags. And they are rags too. And you wonder in their state of technology, how do they keep the clothing clean or don't they? Is it that they're living in filth and drabness? It's as if everything they're in is actually old, was old then, whereas we're so new to everything. We're so used to everything being so new. The clothes I wear each day, they're freshly washed and unless I'm of modern inclination, and in New Zealand seem to be obsessed with the colour black. They have some sort of colour, especially some cultures like tropical, Indian or island cultures. There's colour, vibrant colour. But we're so struck by, pictures of, China 100 years ago, and you think there's poverty going on. But then if we look at Europe 100 years ago, well, they're all in very formal clothing. But by today's standards, it's not so new. Everything's new now. Isn't that strange? The present is always new, I suppose, relative to the past. It seems to have life. And the past we look at and shudder and think, my goodness, every one of these people I'm looking at are dead now, and the body's just dissipated back into nature, and they are no more. What is this life without life? And without joy and interaction and communication and the comforts of life and the freedoms of life. We're very critical of our present state in the world and socially, politics and economics and so on. but it's fantastically rich compared to what seems to be being experienced in the past. And we've preserved the past on film, be it digital, record now, pictures and sounds. We weren't supposed to, in a sense. We were supposed to let it die and not be a concern to us. But we look at it and in a sense we're appalled at the low quality of life there. That life hasn't got the opportunity of engaging with matter in the astonishing complex technology that we now have. So we're sad that such beings, such people, missed out on what we experience. But there's no need really, because such experience has vanished into the past, but for our contrived way of trying to keep it present. Will our future too seem an incredible impoverishment compared to the riches of life in the future? Or will it be as we fear, non-existent? Being just non-existent, not being at all. And 'tis this fear that drives us on to live in the life that we have now and in the circumstances that we find we have, and make of them as best we can. And you might say, from a very selfish point of view, we hang on to life, being attached to the now, because it's our myopic way of seeing life as being in the only way it can be expressed, in the now. But when we find life is itself eternal, not in the now, but in all being, when we come back to an eternal being, consciousness of such, and the hope is, the understanding is, we find it for the better, because we come back with overwhelming desire from the values that we now have gained from this transitory visit here to the universe of the transitory, that we call life, but is in fact a transitory childhood. To an abundant life eternal, ideally. And we stay here until we can graduate to such state of being. I hope that our eternity be, in some sense, with the wonderfulness of our hopes and values that are transformed into a harmony with abundance of eternal life. I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And this is life eternal, to know Thee, the only true God, the Jesus story, Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.